Can anyone visit Antarctica? And if you do visit, do you have to be part of an organized tour, or can you go by yourself? Are there places in Antarctica that are off limits that you're not allowed to go? Do people live there? Can you live there? We'll answer all those questions and more in this video. My name's Jeff Capps, and I've lived and worked in Antarctica on and off for the past 6 years. So we'll start by answering the most obvious question first. Can anyone go to Antarctica? Well, as I mentioned, I've lived and worked there for the past 6 years, so yes, people can go there, but can just anybody go there, or do you have to be part of some government organization? Well, the short answer is yes, anyone can go to Antarctica. That is, anyone in the world from any country can visit Antarctica if they wanted to. In 2024, more than 120,000 tourists visited the White Continent, most of them by cruise ship. Now, that's not to say there aren't any restrictions, but anyone in the world can visit Antarctica at any time. So we'll talk in this video about how you can visit, as well as what some of those restrictions are. So now that we've established that you can visit Antarctica, how do you do it? Now, the cruise ship is the most popular way to visit Antarctica. Number one, because it's the least expensive, but also it gets you right up close to Antarctica. So it goes down, typically they all go down the Antarctic Peninsula, which there's where all the glaciers, the mountains, the penguins, you get to see it all just from one trip. Other options are sightseeing flights that fly from Australia, and they'll typically just go around on a commercial airliner and they'll fly around. Definitely a much warmer option, and you get to see quite a bit as well. It's still pretty impressive from the sky. And then your third option would be flying down and actually landing on the continent. And this is the way that you get to the South Pole if you actually want to go to the geographic South Pole. That's how you get there. And basically you fly down and you land at Union Glacier or at some of the other airfields down there. And then you can actually walk around on the continent. You can fly to different parts. You can fly to the South Pole. But if you're flying down there and landing, that's generally going to be the most expensive option. Now, you can also work at a scientific research station in Antarctica like I did. And that's something I'll do a whole nother video on later. Now, the reason anyone can visit is because Antarctica is not governed by one country. Nobody actually owns Antarctica. So that means you can travel there without a visa or a passport. So if Antarctica isn't owned by any one country, where do the rules and regulations actually come from? So you see, in 1959, 12 countries came together and signed the Antarctic Treaty, which protects Antarctica as a place for scientific research, but also forbids any one country from claiming sovereignty over Antarctica. Now, some countries do have territorial claims over certain areas, but Antarctica as a whole is accessible to any country in the world. Now, there seems to be a common misconception that the Antarctic Treaty actually bans individuals from visiting Antarctica unless you're part of a tour group, but it doesn't actually do that. What it does do is establishes rules and sort of boundaries for what you can and can't do while you're there. Now, while the treaty has many different parts and subparts to it, it really has three main goals. The first is to declare that any activity conducted in Antarctica is for peaceful purposes, basically meaning no military activity or testing can take place there. The second goal is to promote scientific research, allowing any research and data to be shared and accessible to anyone. And the third goal is the one that we're most concerned with as visitors, and that's protecting the environment. You see, generally anywhere humans go, they tend to destroy it. And with Antarctica's pristine environment that hasn't really had much human influence, it'd be nice to keep it that way. So if you want to visit Antarctica, your biggest consideration is probably going to be the environmental regulations. Now, if you're visiting on a cruise ship or as part of a tour group, the company has already taken care of most of these regulations in the background, so you probably won't notice. Although they will brief you on what you can and can't do down there, specifically when it comes to interacting with wildlife. You know, generally the rule for wildlife is that if they react to our presence in any way, then that means we're too close to them. And even working down there, we spent a lot of time getting briefed on the environmental protocols, specifically when it comes to how close we can get to wildlife. But if you're going by yourself or you're taking your own tour group down there, you will be subject to an environmental impact assessment. And what that means is you just go through your tour and you figure out exactly, what the environmental impacts of your tour are going to be. And that just includes interacting with wildlife. If you're taking a ship down there, there's going to be emissions from the exhaust. And in addition to the environmental impact assessment, you are required to follow all of the rules and regulations per the Antarctic Treaty. And all of these can be found on the Secretariat for the Antarctic Treaty website. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the cruise ships and the flights down there because literally a Google search, cruises to Antarctica, we'll bring up a million options and you kind of look through all of them, see all the prices and stuff like that. What I want to talk about is things that aren't common knowledge. So I want to talk about visiting. Can you visit just by yourself? I said anyone can visit down there. So could you hop on your own boat and travel down to Antarctica and travel around without a tour group? And yes, you can. Technically, if you had your own plane, you could fly your own plane down there and get off and travel around wherever you wanted down there, assuming you followed all the environmental protocols. The challenging thing about doing your own trips to Antarctica is that there's no support down there. It has to be self-supported, meaning that if you take your own plane down there, you have to have enough fuel to get there, land, and come back, because you can't stop and get fuel while you're down there. There are scientific research bases down there, but if you land your plane next to a scientific research base and say, hey, can I get some fuel for my plane? Most likely you're not going to get fuel for it. So your mission has to be entirely self-supported. You have to bring enough fuel, you have to bring enough supplies, you have to bring basically everything to facilitate your trip. Now, obviously, for some people, money's not a factor. So you could get your own plane, you get all your own resources. You'd probably want a guide if you weren't familiar with touring around in glacial environments. So why don't more people do it? Well, you see, Antarctica is not just regulated by the Antarctic Treaty, it's regulated by something far more strict, and that's the Antarctic environment itself. Antarctica is very, very unforgiving. Not only is it the coldest place on Earth, but it's also the windiest continent on Earth by average wind speed. It's the highest continent on Earth by average elevation. It's drier than any continent on Earth. It's actually the largest desert in the world. And when you do visit, you have to visit during the summer months. That's because Antarctica is unsurvivable in the winter. At the South Pole Station where I worked, the average temperature in the winter, this is temperature, not wind chill, is minus 60 degrees Celsius. That's average. So in the winter, nobody's going down there. Nobody's flying down there. Nobody's taking a cruise down there. And it's not just the temperature we're talking about. The winter is the most extreme weather on Earth. When snowstorms come in, they last for days. Wind speeds can exceed 300 kilometers an hour, meaning a lot of Antarctica is completely inaccessible to tourists during the winter, even if you were fully prepared. So you've established that you want to go on a trip to Antarctica by yourself. You're following all the environmental protocols, you've done an environmental impact assessment. Now comes the big question, can you visit anywhere in Antarctica? Can you just go anywhere on the continent? Or are there only specific zones that you can travel to? This is probably the most common misconception about Antarctica, is that there's only specific zones. I think someone commented on one of my videos and told me that the South Pole is like Disneyland. They take you to a specific spot and they only show you that spot. I think the conspiracy is that there's areas that are protected by the military, forbidden to travel to. But what's realistically preventing you from traveling anywhere in Antarctica, which you can, with some small exceptions, we'll talk about the scientific exceptions, you can visit anywhere in Antarctica. The limiting factor is how you get there. So if you're flying over, sure, you can fly over basically anywhere on the continent and you can see it. But say you're on the ground on skis or a snowmobile or something like that, it's not easy to get around Antarctica. You have the topography, you have this massive mountain range. Up here on the polar plateau, there's not really much. You can travel around there and see flat white for as far as you can see. But the continent itself is far more vast than I think a lot of people imagine. So it's actually twice the size of Australia. So you can imagine that traveling around there, it's not just like, I'll be honest, when I first started working at McMurdo Station, which is right down here, I didn't know better. I thought that, I worked down there as a snowmobile mechanic, and I thought that maybe I could take a snowmobile on test drive and test drive it to the South Pole, which is here some 800 miles away. Obviously, that doesn't happen. But it brings me to the point that if you did want to travel around and you want to see anywhere on the continent, you're not going to be guarded by military, but you're going to have to travel a very long ways to get to different parts. And while you're traveling to those parts, you have to deal with all of the hazards that Antarctica has to offer. We talked about the weather already, those extreme winds that can come out of nowhere, those storms that last for days, things like that. But on the land itself, your biggest threat is going to be the crevasses. So here's a video that I took of flying over from the South Pole, and you can see these crevasse fields are just massive. They're endless. They go on and on forever. And imagine trying to walk across that or trying to get across that in a snowmobile. When I first started, I thought, well, it's a giant crack in the ice. How am I going to, how am I not going to see it? I'm not just going to walk into a crack in the ice. It's not just these visible cracks that you see in the video. As the snow falls and the snow blows around, it can actually create snow bridges over the top of them. And what that'll do is it's just a thin layer of snow, but it completely seals over the top of it. So if you're walking, all of a sudden you're walking on solid ground, you step on one of the snow bridges, boom, you're falling hundreds and hundreds of feet. If you survive the fall, you're now wedged in a crevasse somewhere in the middle of Antarctica. Rescue is almost impossible. And crevasses were one of the main threats for the original explorers when they were trying to get to the South Pole or traversing anywhere around Antarctica. They would lose men in crevasses. They'd lose, sleds, dogs, everything would fall into these crevasses. And just literally, the way they tell the story is that, somebody just dropped through the snow and they were never seen or heard from again. So yes, while you can legally travel almost anywhere in Antarctica, that's why people only go to specific areas. They're areas that they know they can get to, and they're areas that they know are safe. So I mentioned there are some areas that are off limits due to science. These are your ASPAs and your ASMAs. That's Antarctic Specially Protected Area and Antarctic Specially Managed Area. Now, before all you conspiracy theorists go, oh, that's where they're doing all the secret military testing and the aliens and all this stuff. The ASPAs and ASMAs are generally quite small areas. You could stand at the edge of them and basically see the whole thing. So it's not anything like that where anything's like weirdly hidden from you. The reason that they're there is they're either areas where scientific research is taking place, where if a human were to enter that area, they would disturb the data. We have an area at the South Pole that you can't drive a vehicle through because that's where they measure the air quality, things like that. They might set up an area to protect specific wildlife or a penguin colony. They're kind of like those areas on a hiking trail that say, keep off of this area, for regeneration of plants or things like that. And these areas are definitely something you would want to be aware of when you're planning your trip, as traversing through them not only could ruin the scientific research, but can also come with hefty fines and jail time. So now that we've found out that anyone can visit Antarctica, the last thing I want to talk about is, should you visit Antarctica? Now, I mentioned that last year, more than 120,000 tourists visited Antarctica. And while all those tour companies are following the very strict environmental regulations, they do still have somewhat of an impact. I mean, you're bringing a ship down there. The ship's burning fuel. Even the Antarctic research stations do create pollution while you're down there. So while the Antarctic environment is still staying pristine compared to the rest of the world, every little bit has its impact. Now, I'm not sitting here saying you shouldn't visit. That's obviously up to you. But do take into consideration the environmental impact that your visit will have. And please, if you decide to visit, I just ask that you please don't be that one guy. And we all know who I'm talking about. It's going to be the guy holding the penguin, for the picture on his Instagram. If that's you, don't visit Antarctica. And actually, if that's you, don't visit anywhere, really. Just stay home. Thank you for watching. Tons more Antarctic videos and content to come. If you do have any questions about this video, drop them down in the comments and I'll try to answer as many of them as I can.